this video, I will discuss important topics about slavery that they do not teach in school nor do modern-day historians like to mention. One of the most intriguing facts is there are historical records that thousands of African Americans owned slaves themselves. I am not sure why they are trying to hide this information, but slavery is and was never about race. Slavery had a long history in the ancient world and was practiced in ancient Egypt and Greece, as well as Rome. In the Middle Ages, white people were enslaved in Europe and Africa until the same time slavery was abolished in America. Watch this video till the end and subscribe to our channel, as we will be uploading very interesting videos every week. The practice of slavery as an oppressive and exploitative labor system was prevalent in both Western Africa and the Americas long before the influence of Europeans. Did you know who took the most slaves from Africa? For the first 130 years, the Portuguese dominated the transatlantic slave trade. After 1651, they fell into second position behind the British, who became the primary carriers of Africans to the New World. Here are the most famous African American slave owners. Number 15. Marie-Thérèse Metoyer, an African American free lady who owned slaves in Louisiana. Number 14. Anna Gallum, black woman plantation owner in Florida. Number 13. Richard Edward DeReef was a prominent African American member of South Carolina society. Number 12. Mary Ann Celeste Dragon, an African American, one of the most powerful women in the history of Creole New Orleans. Number 11. Aspasia Crevellier Moreau, just like her mother and sister, who were also black slave owners in Savannah, Georgia. Before I continue the list of the most famous black slave owners, why do historians today still ask one of the most vexing questions in African American history, as whether free African Americans themselves owned slaves? The short answer to this question, as you might suspect, is yes. Of course, they did. Historians have been arguing for some time over whether free blacks purchased family members as slaves to protect them. The reality is they purchased other black people, as an act of exploitation, primarily to exploit their free labor for profit. Many free black rich plantations, farms, and other business owners turned to slave breeding to keep up with the demand of their business expansion. For example, William Ellison Jr., a cotton gin maker and blacksmith in South Carolina, was an African American who achieved considerable success as a slave owner and breeder before the American Civil War. He eventually became a major planter and one of the wealthiest property owners in the state. Did you know that in 1860 there were 393,975 slave owners in the slave states out of a population of 12,240,293? So this means that 3.22% of the population of the 15 slave states were slave owners. But did you know many slave owners were black? Here are the top 10 most famous black slave owners. 10. Nat Butler. African American slave owners in Maryland gained a bad reputation for their scheming actions in purchasing and selling others. 9. Dilsey Pope, an African American woman slave owner in Georgia. She and her husband fought, and Dilsey sold him to her white neighbor out of spite. 8. The Pendarvis family owned the biggest rice plantations in the Palmetto region and was one of the wealthiest slave-holding families in South Carolina. 7. Justice Angel was a wealthy slave owner and trader in Charleston, South Carolina. 6. Widow Richards operated a large sugar plantation and owned more slaves than all other black slave owners in Louisiana until the 1860s. 5. Antoine de Buclet was an African American who held slaves in the state of Louisiana in the 19th century. He was also involved in politics and represented Louisiana in the state legislature. 4. John Carruthers Stanley was an African American who held slaves in the state of North Carolina in the 19th century. 3. William Ellison was a very famous African American slave owner and merchant in South Carolina in the 19th century. 2. Elizabeth Fraser Skelton. Between 1834 and 1847, she was the owner and manager of the famous upscale hotel in Charleston, South Carolina. 1. Anthony Johnson, an African American who lived in the British colony of Virginia in the 17th century and was a very wealthy slave owner. Anthony Johnson was the first person to own a slave in the USA. He later became a tobacco farmer in Maryland. He attained great wealth after completing his term as an indentured servant, and has been referred to as the Black Patriarch of the first community of Negro property owners in America.